Welcome to Immersion Technology with our panelist, Director of Content, Compass Mining, Will Foxley, VP of Commercial Services at RK Mission Critical, Jesse Davern, and replacing Nathaniel Yu is Chris Manzano, Bitmain.
Okay, here we are. Half those photos were not us on stage, but that's okay. Still got these two up here. Jesse Davern, RK Mission Critical. They make some of the best and most robust modular containers in Bitcoin mining. They also have some immersion aspirations, which we'll get to on this panel. And then Chris Manzano of Bitmain. Take it away.
It's working. Everyone, it's good to be here.
Yeah, hi everyone. Nice to meet you.
Cool. I think immersion is probably the best topic at a Bitcoin mining conference because it's the most complicated. And I like complicated problems. So we're going to dive into the first one. How do you make the CapEx make sense when Bitcoin is down 70%? And will Bitcoin mining survive an immersion form over the bear market? So I'm going to start with Jesse, actually, because you guys have put a lot of capital into it, building some of the more robust modular containers for immersion. You guys did that JV with Skate Ventures, which is mostly based out of Washington State, pretty robust mining from up there. Air-cooled, but you guys have been working on that hydro solution, or I should say immersion solution.
Yeah, so do we think it's going to survive the market? Yes. So what we see right now is that, miners who have some capital, they can purchase their mining machines at much less cost than what they could have maybe 6 to 10 months to a year ago. So they're buying, the miners at a less expensive cost. They're then able to use the capital that they're saving from just the market price of the miners and put that into more expensive CapEx on the immersion side versus air, right? So it's basically right now is a great time for them to be able to transfer money that they're saving on miner purchases, put that into immersion capital, and basically know that their miners are going to be, operating in a stable environment for the next 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 years without having to buy new machines, or maybe they would have to if they're operating the same units in air.
So I'm going to follow up in a second with you, Chris, but I want to keep on the same topic. So what Arcade does, they have this huge warehouse in Denver, both Denver boys, so going to rep that for a second. They have this huge container store in Denver that they're operating and building. Lots of manufacturing going there, dozens of staff members. You guys got some robots kicking up there too. Like there's a lot going on there. The capital intensity of that project, I think, is notable. And I think for a lot of teams out there that are wondering how to make the economics of their mining platform work right now, I think a lot of times they're looking at this immersion saying, like, this is too expensive for us. We want to turn towards air-cooled during a bear market. But from what you're seeing from customers specifically when they're coming in the door wanting to purchase their product, like what is their rationale behind it? Like you just mentioned that like you get more hash rate out of your machines, you're more efficient. But still, I think that upfront cost can really eat away at you. You have that invoice for so much more money versus just buying an air-cooled container and putting a bunch of S19s in it.
Yeah, but so basically, what they're looking at though is that they're hedging on being able to buy these miners, overclock, and have them last much longer in an immersion system versus trying to maybe have to re-up in 18 months or 2 years when you start to see some air machines fail or have to get a bunch of work done on the maintenance side on air units, which you just don't see in immersion applications.
Okay, so people are actually thinking that way for the first time. That's good to hear.
It's not everyone, but the customers that we do have capital right now.
Yeah.
And they want to spend that capital diligently across however they want to deploy. That's kind of the consensus that we see a lot of these customers have right now.
Awesome. Okay, Chris, booting it over to you. Obviously, Bitmain is more focused on hydro itself. You guys are building it into per unit, per ASIC. But same question, how does hydro and immersion look from Bitmain's perspective going into a bear market?
I think that there are a lot of factors that people don't necessarily look at when they're considering their build out for a mining farm. Definitely economies of scale and standardization have a big effect on your overall costs. And also you have to look at sort of the differences that you're seeing with these new technologies where maybe in the past you needed 10 people to run a certain number of megawatts. But with these new technologies, you have automations, you have all these sensors and systems involved that can help you manage a much larger farm more effectively. So I think that there are a lot of costs that people don't necessarily think of when they're first starting about the facility, and even the cost of failure. Like if you try something and you're experimenting, maybe you lose a batch of miners because you've never done immersion before, or you're trying to implement your own sort of water cooling solution on a miner. But when you have companies that have already paid that cost and are developing these solutions for you ready to go, I think that that's a big benefit for basically mining in a bear market. You already have the solution, you have the path, and I think it was touched on here already. But when you use these new solutions, especially with the hydro, you're getting much more stable hash rate. So not all hash rate is created equal, and if you have that bit of isolation from the environment, I think it's really going to give you a leg up on other miners in the industry. And now is really the time to build, because when you're in a bear market, you can get transformers, you can find resources, you can find all these things that when the price of Bitcoin is high, it's, everyone's just kind of holding on to them to sell to somebody else. But right now, it's if you're ready and you ran a good business getting to this point, I think that it's a really good time for you to be a miner.
Okay, so we got the pitch for why immersion matters right now, even though our favorite coin's price is not doing so great. One of my favorite things coming to any sort of mining conference is it's almost like a 7th grade science fair where you have all these different mining solutions popped up in the hallways with all these tubes and gadgets, and everyone's trying to explain to you how you're going to get a little bit more profit out of it. And that's great, but it's also confusing. So let's go through both your guys' setups and see what the differences are. Chris, we'll start with you on the hydro side. Explain from a top level for 30 seconds to a minute about how hydro works for an ASIC, and then let's go more specifically into what Bitmain is building. And then Jesse, we'll go over to you just the full immersion, dunking an ASIC into water. How does that work? And then we'll talk more specifically about your product.
So I think that one of the basis for all of this is that the machines that are coming out now have a much higher concentration of hash power. They're more powerful, and that's going to generate more heat. So everyone's looking at a solution to take care of this heat effectively. And one of the reasons that we like using a closed loop of water and then another loop to cool it with our hydro solution is that you basically have a way to cool these machines evenly to get even hash rate without using a lot of electricity. So you're using water, but that allows you to run a cooling setup with a lot less electricity than if you were using a dry cooler or some sort of industrial chiller. And in the end, that means that more of your electricity is going towards your mining operations instead of paying for the cooling. So if you have water available, and this is something that you're willing to try and put out the capex to basically do something that's been well established in the industry, because liquid cooling has been around for forever essentially. With it's not new. It's something that the computing industry has been using for a long time. Google and these major companies use liquid cooling for their data centers. So we think that this is a much more effective cooling solution, and water itself is more effective at drawing away heat than oil or dielectric fluid. So that's pretty much it for our solution. It's just, we think that for your average customer, somebody who's not going to spend a lot of time kind of tweaking their solution, that this is definitely a safer, better way to go.
Okay, Jesse, same question to you. High-level explanation of immersion mining, and then getting a little bit more specific with your guys' setup.
Yeah, so immersion, right? We're taking machines and putting them in a dielectric fluid that's doesn't conduct electricity. So you can literally put your hand in the fluid when you have 4,000 amps running through it, and nothing's going to happen. Okay, so what our solution is we'll kind of hit on it earlier that we partnered with a company called Skate Ventures, who is a self-miner, and they've been doing immersion since 2018. Right, our RK Mission Critical, we're a large-scale manufacturer, and we really got into the space doing air cooling. Okay, and we've got about 1 gigawatt of air-cooled containers out in the market in the U.S. right now. So kind of, our entry into the space was, all right, we saw clients starting to push us to say, hey, you guys are the largest container manufacturer. You need to start having an immersion solution to offer. So, we went around and we looked at all these different ideas. Could we buy an immersion company and scale their product? Could we partner with someone? And we didn't really find anything very innovative in the market until we came across Skate Ventures, right? So what we're doing is, what they developed is what we call a hash box. So it's single server, single miner cooling, okay? So instead of having, a large bathtub with, let's say, 24 to 40 miners in there, we're taking a different approach where we have an injection molded little hash box, right? A little mini tub that each individual miner sits in. And we have a flow control valve going to each miner. So instead of, having all these miners in one tank, inherently you do get hot spots. It's hard to get even flow across miners. It's hard to mix match different brands of miners within those large tanks. We can individually control the flow to each miner and make sure that each miner's chip is operating at the temp that we want it to, versus kind of taking an aggregate over one large tub. So, basically we still kind of build in these larger chunks of 2 megawatts is, our core product. So depending on the type of machines you're running, whether it's, Bitmain or What's miners, and how much you want to overclock really depends on the number of machines that we can put in a unit. But, we're finding that also having the hash box allows us to run different machines next to each other. So if you're a hosting company, right, and you may not be able to dictate what machines you're getting from a customer or from your client, we can have M30s running next to S19s in the same system, and you're not having to worry about one underperforming because they do have different form factors.
Gotcha. Okay, so 2 different systems here, and won't ask you guys to fight on stage, but I am going to ask for critiques of different models. So the immersion model, obviously you have to have like this huge bath, you need a container system for it, dielectric fluid. And then the hydro model, you're actually running it through the machine itself. You're not really going to be able to build that yourself unless you're really an ASIC wizard, but you're gonna have to go buy it from a manufacturer like Bitmain. Both have different trade-offs, CapEx, OpEx, all those sort of things under that umbrella. Curious your guys' thoughts on things that you've seen people have made mistakes on in terms of building immersion or hydro units to date, like popular mistakes that have been made over the last 2 years, because who in this room has not seen but like a billion different models for all these things? I think now is the time where a lot of those mistakes are coming to light and people are going to get washed out, and there's going to be better models that are going to survive over the next few years. So this is your chance to kind of punch down a little bit if you want to on like different mistakes you've seen from immersion and hydro. Chris, I'll start with you for hydro, and if you want to meander into immersion as well, feel free.
Well, I'm up here on stage, so I would love to say that everything's perfect. But the one thing for hydro is that you do want to make sure that you do have water. So for any water or hydro cooled data center, you need to make sure that you're in an environment that is going to allow you to run it. These machines can run in many different environments. I mean, you could run in super cold temperatures. You could run in we have these machines running even in the deserts of the Middle East. So there's always a way to make things work. But I guess the lesson that I would come away with it is that it's something where you want to think about the environment that you are first, and then come to us and ask the questions like, so what do I need to do to get this running in my backyard? And I think that asking those questions is really important. You shouldn't just go to one site and assume that everything's going to be the same there, because every city has different building codes. And it's just important to look at it as a whole project and just come to us and ask any questions that you have. Because running these in super cold temperatures is going to be a little bit different than running it in a subtropical climate. You can add glycol into the fluid mix to keep the inner loop from freezing. You can circulate it if it ever stops. You could circulate it before basically to get it back up to temperature where the miners are going to be able to start again if it was in some sort of extreme cold climate. So there's a way to operate this in every environment, and you have some isolation from the outside world, which I think is worth something. If you look at air-cooled miners, they're treated really badly in a lot of mining farms. You've got bugs, you've got snow, you've got rain, just stuff that you would never imagine inside your computers is getting into Bitcoin miners. They're treated more like kind of warriors out on the battlefield than high compute servers. So I think that immersion or hydro and all these solutions actually help with isolating them from the environment, and that's one of the best things out there.
Yeah, same question to you. From an engineering standpoint, what are some of the common mistakes you've seen over the last 2 years, or since RK's really stepped into the immersion scene?
Yeah, so I think making sure that you're doing your due diligence on the products that you're purchasing, right? And probably one of the biggest things is just making sure that the product that you're going to receive truly meets NEC code and OSHA requirements, and that you're not going to purchase a unit that ends up getting red tagged on your site when the inspector goes in there and it doesn't meet code, right? So that's one kind of like fundamental thing to watch for. The other thing is, we're very heavy on the engineering side, right, of doing full design, CFD models, everything you can think of as far as like a documentation standpoint to show due diligence on our design. But until you start building units and have operating units, you're never going to work out every bug. So it's very important that when you go buy something, that you have at least some data for how that's going to operate. And hopefully, whoever you're working through can actually produce data saying, hey, we've tested these units. These are the different machines that we're running. These are the, how much you can overclock. These are the different temperatures they like to operate at. And that's one thing that our team with Skate can bring to the customer.
While we're still on the hydro versus immersion topic, or generally speaking, between the two of them, let's just be clear on how they're deployed. So hydro, very much so industrial, correct? Or have you seen any implementation where someone can use maybe 1 megawatt, put one of your guys' amp boxes down, and use hydro mining?
Okay, so we sell these in 1 megawatt units. So you get a container to put your miners in, and you also get the cooling tower. So it is set up to be a 1 megawatt unit that you could just, do it like that. More interestingly, this is usually something that we only take to conferences for marketing purposes. But I think we've made about 7 mini hydro setups, and everyone who's seen these has asked us if they can get one. But it basically holds two hydro miners. So we had this. We recently had an event in Cancun, and at the event we had these miners running pretty much the whole time, and that was very, very interesting for us. So it was the first time that we actually had an event where the mini was able to turn on, just because you need a special power supply for that. So it's cool. If you want to do it small, you can. And I think as a company, our goal is to sell miners. So in the future, this box, this container, the ant space, is one way that we're accomplishing that goal, because it's the early stage. So we need to have something out there that you can just take and set up and use, and that's simple. But in the future, maybe we can open source this. Maybe we can have, if you have a custom solution and you want to, you have experience designing data centers, you understand temperature and pressure, then maybe there are other ways to work with a similar system. But our goal at the end of the day is to sell the miners. So I think that yes, there is room for people to do this at a smaller scale, but it is something that I think we're going to see more of in the future, especially if somehow the mini catches on and we start making more of them. I don't know if we will, but that'd be interesting.
Yeah, totally. The reason I asked that question is because we saw this huge pleb miner movement over the last 2 years where a lot of people wanted to boot up S9s in their garage, and some very enthusiastic people tried to get into immersion at home or at small scale. So immersion mining at home, possible, any way, shape, or form next 5 years from your purview, or is it purely industrial for the big players?
Right now, we're really focused on the industrial side for the big players. We're basically selling units at 2 megawatts, 667 kW, and then 170 kW. And that's kind of the smallest footprint that we want to play in right now. And sure, I guess someone could buy a 170 kW setup, but we from our manufacturing side, the way that we can get our costs down is through volume. So we would rather sell someone, that has a 100,000 square foot building. We want to sell them 200 of the 170 kW units. So we're not really playing in the home mining space.
Soon, I'm sure. Okay, Chris, let's go back to you. Let's talk about some insider secrets at Bitmain, if you are willing to do that on stage. Let's talk about hydro plans. Any plans with an ASIC chip that's optimized for hydro, or anything right now that you guys are working on or have put out that is specifically optimized for hydro? Maybe it's on the firmware side, maybe it's on the chip side. You mentioned some things with like the boxes themselves, that they have some like techniques within them that allows you guys to pull more hash rate out of them.
So as far as optimizations go, I think with hydro and kind of the direction that we're going in the future is you're going to see a concentration of hash rate. And the emphasis isn't just going to be on the individual components inside of a miner, but on the system as a whole. So our goal is kind of to go with the idea that not all hash rate is created equal, and that by creating a system that works together perfectly or very well, we can build something that's more than the sum of its parts. So as part of that, we have systems in the Ant space that'll help you automate the setup. We have our own software called Ant Sentry. Ant Sentry was used internally within Bitmain for like testing purposes for a long time, and now it's something that we're kind of promoting to the world. I think a lot of people don't know about Ant Sentry or haven't taken a look at it, but if you go to antsentry.com, you can check it out, and at least for right now, it's free. So Ant Sentry also is very important for our hydro setup. So by being a manufacturer, we can combine the hardware, the casing for the systems, and automation to make it all run better. So I think that if there's any like secret sauce or something that's going to really make the difference, I think it's the fact that we can make every part work better together.
Now, RK is slightly different than Bitmain, obviously. You guys aren't building boxes themselves, but you do interact with a lot of customers who are wanting certain requirements for their mining operation. So from your standpoint, what are some things for immersion mining that you'd like to see, maybe on the firmware side? Maybe it's something that you guys want to design still that you haven't been able to. Maybe it's something larger out there.
Yeah, so I think on the firmware side, right, I mean, we do see what's miners more friendly to work with in immersion. And probably there's a reason, since you want to push the hydro, which is fine, right? But the firmware is definitely challenging to work with. You got to think about that with the miners that you're wanting to use. From us not being a machine manufacturer, what we would love to see and what we think is coming, what we know it's coming from some manufacturers, is just the whole form factor change of what the miners look like, right? I mean, they're designed for air, they're big, they're bulky, there's lots of extra stuff on there you don't need. So we know it's coming, and there's certain players that are going to enter the space that are developing more immersion ready machines that are going to perform better.
Okay, 2 more questions for you guys. Operations one, and then prediction time for immersion mining. Operations side, we've seen a large amount of deployments, I should say, of immersion units, specifically through public filings. We can see like what Riot and Argo and all these other guys are doing with their immersion setups. The information that we also see is that it can be very tricky to deploy these things at scale. For instance, I don't want to call anyone out on stage, but there have been a lot of large megawatt deployments at some of these public companies that have not gone well because it's difficult to do at scale. So from your guys' purview, what is the solution to that? Is it an all-in-one, all-in-the-box solution with Bitmain? Maybe there's something like that we should know more about, or with immersion itself. What have you seen that's been like difficult to overcome when you're moving into scale? Jesse, I'll throw it to you first, and Chris for follow-up.
Yeah, I mean, luckily scale is our game, right? Like that's what we bring to the mining community is is being able to deliver projects at scale on time, right? With a solution that's already pre-engineered, right? So some of the companies you just, mentioned that, they had a hard time doing it at scale. They weren't really using a pre-engineered solution, right? They were designing and doing a construction project for a large site and putting a lot of risk in their own company by trying to be the designer of that site. Where from what we can bring is we can do it at scale in 2 megawatt chunks, and it doesn't really matter if you're doing it at scale or if you're just buying one. It's a pre-engineered solution that's already been tested and proven out to work.
Chris?
I agree with that having a pre-engineered solution is very, very helpful. And I would also want to say that if you're doing a project, you should, and there's somebody there that's willing to help you. For instance, if our company has people in our company that can help you with your questions or that can help you set up a hydro setup, if they're willing to help, you should take their help and just kind of don't think of a company as sort of just like a faceless organism. You want to be able to build a personal connection with the companies that you work with. If you don't have that personal connection, even from the support side, from the logistics side, then I think it's really hard to do business with a company.
Yeah, one follow-up for you. I know that Poolin and some others have deployed with Bitmain at scale, your guys' hydro solutions. What has that deployment process been like, or do you have any insights into it?
So I know that for hydro, the site that we most like to show everyone is Merkle Standard. Merkle Standard has been doing a great job kind of building out their hydro setup. They recently, on the 16th, yesterday, I think they had a tour, so everybody was able to go see their setup. So if anyone's curious about how hydro is working or they want more information about it, I think that connecting with us or connecting with Merkle Standard would be a good way. I mean, you should, if you're thinking of investing a significant amount, it's always helpful to go and see what it is and to talk to people that operate it day in and day out.
I got to agree with that. You got to go see something before you buy it, right? It's very important to do that. So we're a big proponent of that too. You got to, if you want to see some of our immersion designs, you let us know, and we'll get you up to an R&D facility that Skate operates to see units in action.
Okay, I'd like to end on predictions. So I think you guys are probably the best two people actually to ask this question. Bitmain and RK, since you guys both do hydro and immersion at scale. If we're going to lump hydro and immersion together against air-cooled, what percentage of hash rate is going to become from those two segments of the network in, say, 1 year from now, since it's the end of the year?
Yeah, I mean, the forecast that we're getting from our large customers, we see probably our immersion builds, where last year was 100% air. We probably see that scale tipping to probably 60 to 70% immersion, and then the rest staying at air.
I think we've had a PowerPoint about this at a conference recently. I don't remember the number on the PowerPoint, but I would say 60 to 70% is a very safe bet for the ratio.
Jesse Davern, Chris Manzano, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks.
I'm Lee Bratcher, the president of the Texas Blockchain Council. Thank you to everyone who came out to this year's summit, helping us make it the best one yet. Now more than ever, we need professional industry associations like the TBC to help craft effective policy instead of the CEOs of centralized exchanges roaming the halls of various state capitals or in DC. Texas is quickly becoming the center of the universe for Bitcoin, blockchain, and digital assets. If you want to be part of the future that we are crafting here in Texas, join the TBC today.